First National Trans Visibility March took place on September 28, 2019 in Washington, D.C. With over 5,300 attendees, this historic event brought together both transgender individuals and allies from all over the United States.
We are tired of fighting for our country on foreign soil and then being told that we are no longer fit to serve. We are tired of our murders going without any justice and our murderers out there free. We want to be free, and that's why we are here.
I want you to repeat after me. I am here. I am here. Yes, ma'am.
We need to take back our narrative. We are not victims. We are not statistics. We are not tragedies. We are waiting to thrive, and this is our best year yet, because we aren't here simply to be visible. We are here to be victorious. So when we move forward today, let us press forward with purpose, let us press forward with passion, and let us know that the fight has just begun.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Owning It, the Entrepreneurial Journey. We are so excited to be here to really go through some of the things that we covered last night. I don't know if anyone was around for our Thriving in Business panel, but last night we discussed about having courage, and an entrepreneur needs to have courage. You know, being your authentic self, having a plan and being able to adapt to that plan in an ever-changing environment. And tonight we're going to go into kind of the mechanics behind that entrepreneurial journey of finding your idea, building your plan, accessing capital, and being your authentic self through a certification that can help you gain contracts and grow your business. Danny, could you move to the next slide, please? Tonight, we are doing this in partnership with our friends at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce and Next Street. My name is Stephen Garibell, and I am the Vice President of Business Development for the LGBT community at TD Bank in the US. And our goal is to really work with our customers and our communities to help build a better tomorrow. Danny, could you go to the next slide? Joining me tonight, I have Barton Jackson from TD Bank, who is a Vice President and Small Business Relationship Manager. Stephen Nunes, who's a director at Next Street and is going to go through some great things on accessing capital. And Sabrina Gill, who's a Senior Vice President at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, who's going to talk a little bit about how to use your authentic self to gain contracts and grow your business. Danny, you could go on to the next one. So our objective tonight is to really help understand the basics of building a plan, accessing capital resources, and leveraging small business certifications to grow your business. We're going to cover researching your business idea, the business plan components, which are really important, to then go and gain capital to start and grow your business. Then we're going to talk a little bit about small business certifications to build and grow your brand, and give you a great time for questions and answers. Please, as we're going through, throw your questions into the chat box. If they're on an area that we're discussing, we can address right then and there. But we really want to hear from you. You know, we're here to help build those entrepreneurs and see you guys thrive. Danny, can you go on to the next slide? Perfect. I'm going to turn it over to Barton, who's going to get us started.
Hello, everyone. Like Stephen mentioned, my name is Barton Jackson. I'm a relationship manager and vice president in our commercial bank, and I'm very excited to be with you here tonight. I hope everyone is safe and in good health. We're going to start discussing business plans and why they're incredibly important. Whenever you're investing in a company, it is your living document, it is your strategy, it is organic, it is never static. So it is your sounding board, your mirror, and your ability to adapt and change whatever the economic conditions may be. Now, you'll notice from this infographic that there are a ton of elements that go into a business plan and the research that's involved. Where are you going to have the money come from? How flexible are you going to be? What is your work-life balance going to be as an entrepreneur? Hint, there's a lot more hours spent. What are your personnel needs? What do you think your success rate and your feasibility is? Who's going to manage your company? And how are you going to communicate this to people in a way that's accessible both to lenders, investors, other individuals that you may bring on board as partners? So this may seem overwhelming, but the reason why we show all of these different components into your research plan is to make sure that you're deliberating in a way that is not just well-reasoned, but allows you to prepare for the future and allows to prepare for any milestones or goals that you set for yourself. Danny, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So when we talk about business plans and research, all those components kind of go into a couple of basic categories. So you can kind of think of this slide as a table of contents to your business plan and addressing the different elements that are going to be required. So one of those is your financials. So bankers love to say cash flow. An easier way to understand it is your revenue, the money that you're going to generate. What your profit and loss would be. So are you making money or are you losing money? What are your comfort levels in terms of losing money in the first year or two? And when do you think you'll become profitable? And also, what is your balance sheet? What kind of assets, things that you own or benefit to you, and what kind of liabilities, things that you had to leverage and have obligations to pay back, are you going to have in those financials? And it's really important to have a good understanding of what those are going to look like. And we'll break those down for you a little bit later. But also your customer base. Who is your target audience? Who are you providing a product or solution to? Some of those audiences can be passion-based, ethic-based. It could be a niche market need in service or product. And it's something that you want to consider, not just how are you accessible as a company, but how are your clients going to be accessible to you? And also competition. Competition is your best friend. I know that sounds kind of strange to say, but there's a lot of education out there that your own competitors can provide you and how they perform, whether they're struggling or succeeding. Operations, what are your plans to move forward on a day-to-day basis and longer into the future, and also your future plans, your milestones, your goals. Where do you want to see your company in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years? Danny, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So, as we kind of extend into the table of content, those for our business plan, those categories get broken down a little bit further into these 10 summary parts. I won't go over much here because we're going to go into them on a slide-by-slide basis, but just to kind of give you an idea of what should be in a business plan. I also want to stop here and mention that you're not alone when you create a business plan. You have a team of professionals that you can leverage. One is your banker. While we cannot provide consultative advice, we can at least tell you what should be in there and what to be expected when a banker looks at it for lending needs. Another great resource is usually through a state-run free government program for small businesses that offer free business advisors who make it their task to help you craft a business plan. There are national nonprofits that do this, as well as state-run agencies. So you have kind of a pick of who you're comfortable talking to. With that, we'll go into the next slide. All right. And Steve, I believe this is yours.
Yes. So, we're going to, and while there's a lot that goes on in a business plan, we will never get through all of it tonight. So we're going to share our contact information. If you have questions, we all want to be here as a resource for you as you're starting. But one of the parts of a business plan is your executive summary. And that's really just a synopsis of a company that includes your business description, your company objectives, your product service offerings, your market. It's really important. You might be a national outlet, or you might be a very regional and directed market on just maybe New York City or Washington, D.C., and that's going to be the market you target. Who your customers are, what's your competitive advantage? And I like this one because, just because you're becoming an entrepreneur now doesn't mean you have no experience in the business. We had 2 entrepreneurs last night on our panel who had years of experience before they decided to take the leap and got the courage to go out on their own. So they had a background, and that was their competitive advantage, was the years in the industry they had and the people they knew. Your key management team members, it might not be you. You might have some other people that you're bringing on board to run the day-to-day, or if it's a technical piece, that have those technical skills. And financial and funding requirements. We like to see what's going to be out there so that we can go and help you with that funding. Danny, could you move to the next slide, please? And Barton, this is you.
So product and market. This is where we kind of drill down into the nuts and bolts of what you're offering, but it's not the end-all be-all of your company. I think anybody here on this panel would tell you that there are business owners who are very passionate about their product or their service, and there are business owners that are very passionate or knowledgeable about the way that they do business and are able to administer a business. So everybody comes in with different talents and skill sets, and that's wonderful and great, and you shouldn't worry about where you fall on the spectrum. Everybody has something that they can bring to entrepreneurship. But one of the things that you want to cover is, product and market. One of the things that you want to think about is, let's say, I don't know, I'm a laundry and dry cleaning company. Is that already on the market? Absolutely. But do I have anything that differentiates me? Have I done research in my development stage to say, you know what, I can do something slightly different. Maybe I have an iPhone application that helps me do pick up and drop off with clients that, especially during COVID, really want a contactless solution while they continue to do work. Also, what makes your product unique? Are you providing something that is niche or new or advantageous? And also, is your pricing accessible? Is your service accessible? Transactions are a two-way street. Obviously you want to generate revenue and sales, but you need to find ways that you can outreach to a client base. If we could go to the next slide. Competition. So competition, like I said before, is one of your best sources of research. So when you're looking at other industries or other competitors in the marketplace, why are they successful, or why are they struggling? We kind of need to ask examining questions when we're forming a business plan and enter it into the living document to case study them to see where we're going to fall in terms of our strategy. Also, where do they service? If there's different geographical locations, is there a place where you can, quote unquote, plant your flag to start your base of building a revenue stream of a client base? And also, where's there room for improvement? If you're an innovator or if you have a product or solution that's innovative, is there room to put that into the market? What's the appetite? And don't be afraid to just determine, if you have a superior business model or not. Valuation of your business and your business strategy is a great compass to tell you what direction you need to go in the future. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Danny, please. So resources. When you're looking at your products and your solutions, there's a bunch of research and developments that is available to you. Nonprofit organizations like the Small Business Development Centers of America is one of them. They have research libraries that go through different industries. You can reach out to their business advisors for assistance. You can also look to your local government-run agencies for instruction. There's also premium services like IBIS World or Dun & Bradstreet. And also, looking into purchasing and staffing. What kind of equipment are you going to need? And researching your upfront costs. All of those also come with those research reports where they can give you ideas of what your projections and what your cost and startup might look like. And lastly, operationally, what kind of facilities are you going to need? Those are all things that you'll want to research to determine the efficacy of your product or your service. Next slide, please.
Rolling out your plan and your management structure. It's so important for a business to roll out your plan, because you want your team to understand what your plan is so they can help you reach your goals. Because, while we are all strong individuals, we can't do it on our own. We need the help of the team. And you also, you want to take a look at, do you have any current relationships or need to establish any new ones to help roll out the plan? And I will say that this is probably one of the hardest things for some entrepreneurs to embrace is partnership. And there's partners out there. I know Barton mentioned your banker, and we are a great resource. We have the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce on that has members that can be mentors for you. We have Next Street on, that's a technical assistance provider that is someone that can help with building a business plan. And there's all these great resources out there. So don't go it alone. There are people out there that can help. And you want to understand why you're choosing that person and why, and interview them. When you bring anyone as, I call them, part of your team, your attorney, your accountant, your banker, have a conversation with them. Make sure that you have the same goals and you have the same working style, and that you can take feedback from each other. It's really important. Because your management team is going to have to be the ones to implement this plan. So if you have someone that's running the day-to-day operations, are you looping them in to help build this plan so that they're on board and they understand the goals? Are there any additional trainings that you might need? Special systems that you're going to be using? And do you need any additional management staff, which is, something you want to take a look at as you're going through, because that cost could get large throughout the years. Danny, could you switch to the next slide, please? Your management team. I think this is a really great one to have, your personal history and your background, because this shows, while you might not have been an entrepreneur for years, you could have worked in the industry, just like I said, our entrepreneurs from last night. Your past experiences are, really great. I've had people, I didn't start out my career in banking. I started out my career in retail apparel, and it molded into banking, and there were skills that I had from being a leader in that industry that translated into banking. And we all have leadership skills and skills from our own lives and our own, as LGBT individuals, what some of the challenges we've gone through in our lives, and we've learned from those, and those are good to bring in to your plan, because that's a part of your management team, and it explains some of the things that you've gone through and the adversity that is going to make your business great. And then, you want that personal stuff, the boring stuff, like personal financial statements, if you own anything, if you have, any debt. But this is kind of like your resume, the resume of your management team. Even if it's not the owner, if it's someone that's going to be working for you, think about it. If you're a restaurant, that chef is like ultra important. You might be hiring like the most sought after chef in the area, and you need them to come in and be there. So you want to tell your people that are reading your plan all about that. Danny, could you move on to the next slide? And your employees, what are your full-time, part-time needs? Employees can be costly, and you want to bring the best experience to your employees. So, these are things you want to look at. Are you offering benefits? Are you offering sick time? You want to look at your local area that you're going to be opening in, because those, a city might have a different minimum wage than another city, or different requirements. Are you providing benefits? Are you legally required to provide benefits? Will you pay overtime? This is kind of like your employee handbook that, think about when you worked for someone, you wanted that amazing experience and what the total compensation package would be for them. So, it's these things that are going to help make you a place to work and be a great place. Danny, could you move on to the next slide? And Barton, we are over to you.
All right. So financials. before I get into this, it's, I do just want to recognize Angela's question, which I think is a really good one and a very powerful one in terms of this discussion, right? When we're discussing, how we need to work into a business environment and the question of whether or not it needs to be cis or not. As an ally, I'm a gay cis white man. As an ally, I will never be able to understand or fully identify or appreciate the obstacles in the marketplace for a trans entrepreneur. What I will say is that I'm really looking forward to hopefully having your question addressed in Sabrina's discussion of certification, because one of the things that's really important is that we change the narrative and we change the way that we speak in business language and marketplace, and certifications is a great resource for that. Also, for those that are asking about names of organizations that can help nonprofits, we'll get into that probably a little bit later in the Q&A, but it's a great question to ask. So financials, as we discussed earlier, balance sheet. This is where we're going to indicate the cash position of the business as it's starting up. And of course, you can change this year over year because, again, like I said, this is a living document. You want to revisit this. So this should give you an idea of, at any point in time, what your assets and your liabilities are. So what you have working for you, what are things that you're obliged to pay back. You should also have a break-even analysis, and that is a calculation of the volume of your sales needed to balance your expenses, both fixed and variable, that can fluctuate without exception in order to, at least operate at an even point. Your income statement is also called your profit and loss more often than not, and it indicates how well you're managing your cash. So it's a great metric, especially from the standpoint of, okay, here's my ideation phase of my business plan. Like, I'm just starting out. Well, what did I do in year one? Did I accomplish it? Did I hit my revenue numbers? Did I manage my cash well? Why or why not? You'll be able to see that mathematically on your income statement. And lastly, cash flow, which projects your cash receipts and disbursements. So your money coming in and your money coming out. And if there's a healthy cash flow, that tells you you're on the right track. If you find that there's lags or disruptions or bumps in the road, then that's time to evaluate that. Maybe it's a management issue. Maybe it's a sales issue. And it allows you to dig deeper into your strategy. Next slide, please. So forecasting, yearly financial forecasts. I can't stress that enough. I have a client who I love to death that is of the gender nonconforming community, and she is one of my absolute favorite clients in the whole world because she, I showed her how to do financial projections. She took it and ran with it, and she will reach out to me every financial quarter, and show me where her business is going and where it's growing. And it's so incredible to see that. Your financial forecasts should be a yearly prediction based on, the needs of funds to operate and then go into the future. Ideally 3 to 5 years, whether that's for lending or for investments. And also so that you can look at those targets and milestones as you move forward with your projections, and also look at your revenue calculations that we discussed in the slide before. Next slide, please. So supporting documents. As we kind of stated before, this is going to be your resumes, any credit information, so any kind of credit that you may have decided to seek and source to start your business. Any quotes or estimates. So if you're a startup looking for inventory or equipment, it's really important to have those costs in your business plan. Investors love to see it. Lenders really love to see it because it tells them where the money is going. Letters of intent from prospective customers. Do you have tentative purchase orders? Is there money going to come in when you hit the ground running? Also, any leases or buy-sell agreements, as well as census or demographic data from your target audience, and any legal documents that might be relevant to the business. Next slide.
And we are, so that is a very high level overview of a business plan. And there's a lot more further that you can get and deeper into it. And that's why having a partner, and we'll put them in the chat box later, to help with building that business plan, and a mentor. Remember that word all night, mentor. You all got to see two great business entrepreneurs last night speak. Great mentors to really help with guidance as you're doing all this. But I wanted to turn it over to Stephen Nunes from Next Street. who's a director and is going to talk a little bit about your funding needs for a business.
Thank you, Stephen, and delighted to be here. I think I've been tasked with one of the more important parts of the entrepreneurial journey and talking through how to access capital and how to think about the kind of capital that you need and therefore pursue the right kind of capital for your business. I think while it's one of the most important parts of the entrepreneurial journey, it's also probably most people's least favorite part. Accessing funding and finding funding that your business needs is incredibly difficult. And so I'm hopeful that today's segment will help shed some light on both traditional as well as non-traditional ways to access capital effectively. The first thing to start with when looking to grow your business, start a business, wherever you are in the entrepreneurial journey, when looking to access funding, thinking through your needs for funding. That's the first question that you're going to get when you go to a funder, no matter who the funder. The three questions that will come up is, why does your business need this funding? How will this funding help you achieve your goals relative to where you are in your business and your life cycle? And how much money do you need? Which is incredibly important. I think understanding where you are and how much money you need for the next 12 months versus the next 24 to 60 months is really important in understanding and going to the right types of funders and really in having success in a funding journey. In terms of what funding can be used for, there's a whole range of things that varies from working capital, purchasing new inventory, acquiring space for a new business, expanding your business, expanding to an additional location, making storefront improvements. In connection with COVID-19, we've seen a lot of expenditure on personal protective equipment, upgrades to the workspace to ensure that you're compliant with local health code, paying your employees, of course, which is incredibly important for new businesses. So there's really no strict right or wrong reason to consider funding. The key is to understand why you need that funding, and then to be able to prove why that funding will help your business, which is ultimately what funders are looking for. Next slide, please. So there are a range of funding sources, and it can sometimes be overwhelming as an entrepreneur to understand those funding sources and to understand where to apply, who to apply. And as entrepreneurs, you have a full-time job, which is starting your business, running your business, and add on top of that finding funding for a business. That in and of itself can be a full-time job. So what we're going to talk about today are three of the most common ways that a lot of the small businesses that we see and interact with typically access financing. But really what you've got on this slide, spanning from the top, the cheapest cost of funds, to the bottom with the highest cost of funds, are various ways that you can access funding to grow your business. The first one that I'm going to start with, I'm actually going to start in the middle of the page with debt financing, which tends to be one of the most common ways for small business owners to access capital to grow their business. And what really happens in debt financing, it's akin to any type of other debt financing, student loans, mortgages. When you receive debt financing for your business, a lender is basically agreeing or underwriting to provide you with capital in exchange for a pledge and or proof that you will repay that loan. So it's a fixed amount of capital with a fixed rate and typically a term assigned to it in terms of the life of the loan. But what comes with it is a requirement that capital be paid back. On the other hand, the second likely most common use of capital or source of capital for small businesses is equity funding. And there, what you're doing is providing funding or receiving funding for your business in exchange for ownership in your business. And so there's a real trade-off there where you do give up ownership in your business, but you're bringing along an additional investor who is bringing you the capital that you need to grow your business. And as part of that, taking some of the upside in the overall business and the wealth creation potential of that business. And so there's a real trade-off between debt and equity, where for equity financing, you're not required to make pledges, pledge collateral. There is a much higher threshold for debt financing in terms of what you're required to prove to return that capital, but you're not giving up a share in your business and the long-term future potential and upside. And so those are the things that you typically need to weigh against one another when thinking about debt versus equity. And then increasingly, crowdfunding since 2016 has become a common trend that we see a lot of small businesses use, which is really accessing funding through multiple sources versus going to 2 or 3 concentrated debt or equity funding investors. Running a crowdfunding campaign allows you to access friends, families, networks, and really access capital, which can be structured in the form of debt or equity or grants through a targeted campaign. Now, the trade-off with crowdfunding relative to debt and equity is you have to run that campaign. You have to go out and drum up interest and get people engaged, and each individual contribution is usually small. And so it results in, or typically requires, more engagement from the business owner to raise a scalable amount of funding to start or grow their business. Next slide, please. So I think this is a great segue from the previous discussion in terms of thinking about, I want to get financing. You think through the options, whether it's debt, equity, or crowdfunding based on where your business is. What's the next step in the process? And what we always say, or what we always encourage people to do, I really loved what Barton said, which is there are organizations that exist both locally as well as nationally that help businesses get financing ready. And what that means really is packaging together a set of documents that tell your story. And provide funders with the types of documents that they're going to expect to see to get comfortable with providing you with the capital that you need to grow and expand your business. And so in terms of what that looks like and what the bar is, that is actually different for debt versus equity versus crowdfunding. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, as we talked about with debt financing, the lender really needs to get comfortable with the fact that the business will be able to pay them back. And so the threshold for documentation is always the highest there, or typically the highest there, in terms of requiring to see financial statements, your income statement, balance sheet, and often a cash flow statement as well. The business plan that we talked about, and having that put together well as any tax returns if your business has been up and running already. For equity financing or equity funding, there is a much greater emphasis on the business or growth plan, because their investors are investing in you, investing in the idea, investing in the business, investing in the long term, versus for debt funding, where they're really investing in your short-term ability to pay back. For equity funding, someone's coming alongside you as a partner in the business and the upside of the business, and they index towards business and growth plans and business projections, and really understanding your business and understanding the trajectory of your business to get comfortable with it. And then finally, for crowdfunding, the burden of documentation is a lot lower. And typically, though, marketing is really important there. Telling your story in the community that you serve. We've seen a lot of community-based crowdfunding campaigns emerging over the last couple of years, where people are going out, small businesses are going out to the communities they serve and asking for capital or raising capital from many of the people that they serve in those communities. Next slide, please. So, the topic, the entrepreneurial journey, and that journey does go or evolve from starting your business to early stages of having an operating business to having established business. Where you are in your entrepreneurial cycle really matters in terms of the types of funding sources that you can access and the options that are available. So for startup businesses with less than 1 year, typically there are various sources or potential sources. That ranges from friends and family, early stage incubators, crowdfunding campaigns that we talked about, but there are also non-traditional financial institutions that have been set up and structured and designed to support startup businesses. And we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in one of the subsequent slides. But community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, are nonprofits that provide lending to traditionally and historically disenfranchised populations. And that ranges from small business lending to home ownership and affordable housing lending, to early education and childcare lending, to nonprofit lending and lending to nonprofits. And so community development financial institutions are a great resource for businesses in the earlier stage of their life cycle that may not be able to get that bank loan just yet, because their banker might say, I love your business idea. I need to see a little bit more track record before I can provide that to you. As businesses grow and evolve, as you move to operating businesses, banks increasingly become a better source of capital. and particularly debt financing and debt capital. Once you have a business that's up and running, you have reliable and predictable cash flow, you can start to plan for a loan. And planning for a loan and or a line of credit then allows you to really access that capital, which ends up being a lower cost of capital, again, than equity financing and or some of the non-traditional sources earlier stage that tend to charge a little bit higher rates because the business is perceived as riskier early on. So as you grow as a business, you start to be able to graduate into banks, traditional financial institutions. But then on the equity side of things, as you grow as a business, you become increasingly attractive to investment groups like angel investors, venture capitalists, as well as private equity as you become a much larger business. So your options evolve based on where you are in the entrepreneurial cycle. I think one of the consistent themes, though, is finding a financing partner at the right stage of your entrepreneurial cycle based on your needs. And what we want to emphasize through today's presentation is that there are resources available. Sometimes it can be really draining to, particularly early in your business cycle, to go to 2 or 3 funders and hear a decline and hear you're not ready or you're not there. There are resources beyond that. There are classes of lenders. There are groups that have been set up to address these challenges. And one of the biggest challenges with each of these groups is they're not effective at getting the word out there. And so that's the reason for forums like this, getting that word out there and sharing more about some of these programs. Next slide, please. So I've touched a little bit about how do you think through debt versus equity versus crowdfunding. So very quickly on this slide, for debt financing, some of the key questions that you want to be asking yourself. First, how's my credit? One of the things that debt financiers often look at for a business owner is the primary credit score of the business owner. And what does that look like? Am I willing to provide a personal guarantee, which debt financing often comes with, and or pledge some of my collateral, some of my business collateral, which is typically required. And then what's the term of the loan? Do I need a short-term loan, or do I want a longer-term, more patient loan that I can pay back over time? And based on that, very often there are a range of options that can range from a bank loan to an SBA loan to a loan from a community development financial institution. For an equity investment, you want to be asking, am I willing to give up some of that ownership stake? And that's a really important strategic question. Today, accessing capital, it can be, sometimes the urgency or the need to access capital can supersede the longer term strategic implications of accessing that capital. So you want to think through, is it worthwhile giving up how much ownership I'm giving up today as part of the business journey? What are my long-term plans for the business? Because that's a story that you're going to need to articulate to those equity funders. And how aggressive are my plans for growth? Am I being appropriately conservative, or am I bringing on an investor base or a funder base based on a business plan that will then be a burden to perform against? And then finally, for crowdfunding, it's, do I have an understanding of my network? Do I have a following that I can mobilize to support my business and the story about my business? And then really, really important, this is a question not just around funding, but around a lot of initiatives for a business owner to be asking themselves, do I have the capacity to manage it? Is it worth it? Is it worth my time? Where should I be focusing my time relative to running the business, writing my business plan, raising capital? Where should I be focusing my time? Which is often a very important question to be asking around crowdfunding, given it does require a heavier lift in terms of pushing the campaign out across your network. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a preview of some of the resources and non-traditional capital options that are available to small businesses and entrepreneurs. And my contact details will be made available. I'd be happy to share this and actually share a more detailed brochure that also shows information for how you can access capital through each of these sources. But beyond your traditional financial institutions, there are a range of institutions that do provide capital and focus intentionally on businesses that struggle to access capital from the financial mainstream. And these range from community development financial institutions, which are the nonprofit loan funds that I talked about. These tend to be incredibly rooted in place. And so OFN, or Opportunity Finance Network, which is a network or national mobilizing network of these organizations, has a tool that allows you to search for your local community development financial institution. Who is that local nonprofit in my backyard who I can go and talk to and explore my options? The advantage of them as organizations is they tend to be very high touch. They are people lenders. They lend to people, not based on numbers, and they will spend time with you and then figure out if there's a way to make it work. And they typically have far looser underwriting and lending requirements than traditional financial institutions, because they are supported as nonprofits by philanthropic institutions and government programs that allow them to do so. Alongside community development financial institutions, your local credit union is also a great resource. People don't always know, but many credit unions have small business lending programs that, again, are rooted in the communities that they serve and are very often community-based. And then there are a host of other resources ranging from Kiva, who are a national platform that have 0% interest loans and are increasingly growing that program. Fundera, an online platform that helps you understand some of the online lending options available. But then also public programs that have been coming out, particularly in response to COVID-19. So a couple that I'll stress, the Community Advantage Recovery Loan Program is a recovery loan program that's been put out by the SBA and is being administered through a collection of nonprofit lenders nationally. And the intent there is to provide businesses with loans that are long-term and responsible, and also that provide businesses with some relief. So the first 6 months of interest and payment have been permanently covered by the federal government or the SBA. And that's a program that not a lot of people know about. A lot of people were focused on the Paycheck Protection Program, which is a fantastic program as well, but that was really focused predominantly on supporting payroll costs. The Community Advantage Recovery Loan is meant to cover working capital and recovery costs for a business owner. And then the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. We're all staying tuned to see if there is another stimulus package that gets passed ahead of the election. I think with every passing week, our optimism wanes a little bit, but there may be additional relief and programs that are put out there for small businesses in response to some of the challenges that are being seen by small businesses. So that's the end of my segment. I think the key takeaway that I want to leave you all with is there are options. There are likely more options than you think, and there are organizations like ourselves that are set up to educate you about those options. And so would be happy to follow up with anyone individually around that. But on that, I will pass it over to Sabrina.
Real quick, before we jump into Sabrina, I just wanted to address Francesca's question about someone in the process of bankruptcy. And the community development financial institutions, some of them have some great programs that are credit rebuilder programs. And also, for the type of business that you're looking, it would probably be a nonprofit. And there's some great community development financial institutions that have funding sources as to nonprofits, because if you're going down that route, your business plan and funding is just going to be a little bit different. But definitely, all of these resources are great ways to help. And there are programs out there to help with that credit rebuild program. So I just wanted to touch on that before we jumped over to Sabrina.
Thank you so much to both Steve and Steven for that. Danny, could you go to the next slide, please? My name is Sabrina Kent, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a senior vice president at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and I oversee our supplier diversity initiative. And if you're wondering what supplier diversity is, that's why we're here today. That's what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please, Danny. So we, NGLCC, we were founded in 2002. We are the link between LGBT business owners, corporations, and government partners. And we launched our Supplier Diversity Initiative, which provides our certification to businesses that are 51% or more owned, operated, and controlled by an LGBT person or person. This certification provides them as LGBT business owners access to opportunities with our corporate partners and with one another. So we launched that in 2004. Next slide, please, Danny. We influence policy as it relates to the inclusion of LGBT-owned businesses and procurement opportunities throughout the country with local and state governments. Right now, we are not looking for that on a federal level, but with any luck, we will have a change in the guard come November, and we'll be able to look again at federal inclusion for LGBT businesses in government contracting opportunities. We founded the National Business Inclusion Consortium in 2011, so that's spearheaded by NGLCC, and it includes the U.S. Black Chambers of Commerce, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, Women Impacting Public Policy, Disability In for disabled-owned businesses, the National Veteran-Owned Business Association, the National Minority Supplier Development Council, and I am blanking on the final one, but as you can see, that's 8 out of 10 that I got, so we're good. But this is a cross-segment group of chambers of commerce that focus on uplifting diverse business owners. And so together, where we can weigh in on policy, we do. We honor the top 50 corporations for cross-segment inclusion on an annual basis, and we do so much more together. As an LGBT business community, we represent $1.7 trillion in annual economic impact in the US, but as a collective with all of our diverse communities, because as we all know, LGBT people, we're not just LGBT, we represent over $9 trillion in annual economic impact in the United States. And that's very important when we're weighing in on issues that affect our communities, whether it pertains to business or much more broadly to our basic human rights here in this country. We have 65 local affiliates in the US and globally. 53 of them are here in the US. Our headquarters are in Washington, D.C., and we also have a satellite office in New York City. And as I said, we're founded in 2002, and NGLCC Global was established in 2014. We host the largest LGBT business event in the world, the NGLCC International Business and Leadership Conference. Unfortunately, this year, we don't all get to be together for our conference, but we get to connect in amazing ways like this. Next slide, please, Danny. So we work with over 270 corporate partners like TD Bank. Actually, I just said this today. We are about to hit the 280 corporate partner mark, which is amazing. These are companies that are intentional about including LGBT businesses in their supply chain and in their contracting opportunities. And so businesses that are LGBT owned can come to us for the certification to be included with companies like TD when they're looking to source from LGBT business owners. Next slide, please. And I think it's important that we address Angela's comment from the beginning. You know, what trade do I need to be involved in to be successful as a trans or gender nonconforming business owner? Do I have to conform to a cis environment is the question. And I think it's really important to say that LGBT businesses span every single industry, every single commodity group. You mentioned bakeries, and I always say this, we're not just bakers, we're not just florists, we do amazing things. We're in AI, we're in robotics, we're in construction, we're legal. LGBT business owners represent, I think, the best in class of all businesses, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But supplier diversity, what I mentioned before, is the intentional inclusion of socially and or economically disadvantaged groups in procurement opportunities, meaning that it shouldn't just be white, cis, straight men sitting at a table getting the pick of the opportunity as it relates to this economy. We know that we're taxpayers and we're job creators, whether you're LGBT, an ethnic or racial minority, a person with disability, a woman, so on and so forth. You know, we're all providing to this economy, and therefore we deserve an equitable seat at the table for all opportunities, especially those in business. Next slide, please, Danny. So we think of the circle as LGBT business inclusion, I think oftentimes in just two lanes, right? From the consumer perspective, meaning am I marketing to the LGBT community, are LGBT people and allies buying from me? And then the other side of it being pro-LGBT workplace policies. But if we're not actually putting money directly back into the hands of the LGBT or TGNC business communities, then we're actually not fully completing this ecosphere of inclusion, because we need to be able to provide for ourselves, put food on the table, roofs over our head, and do so much more that allow us to be fully thriving members of the global community and of the economy. And so when we're looking at business inclusion from an LGBT perspective, we always want to remind you that the business piece of it is so important. Next slide, please. So your connection to LGBT Business Enterprise Certification. If you are a TGNC business owner here, I would love for you to get in touch with NGLCC so that we can be sure to connect you with the right kind of resources to help you grow and scale your company outside of the amazing access to capital and business planning opportunities you just learned about in today's session. So I'm going to ask Danny, since I don't have the ability to type in the email address, if you could please put transinclusion@nglcc.org in the chat box, that would be amazing. So as folks have questions about this later on, they can reach out to us directly. But what we do at NGLCC is we help our business owners through the certification process, meaning that when you come to us to become certified to get included in these corporate contracting opportunities, you have a dedicated member of our team there to stand by your side and walk you through the ins and outs of what certification entails so that you can get closer to that opportunity. We also then, once you become a certified LGBT business enterprise, we help connect you with the kinds of opportunities that would fit you as a business owner, your skill set, and what your business brings to the table. So whether it's a product or a service, we have an engagement center that works year round to be sure that we are connecting our LGBT businesses, not only with corporate contracts, but with contracts with one another, right? A lot of times, and we talked about this last night, Steve, in the panel, a lot of times you might not yet be scaled up to work with the TD Banks of the world, but maybe you can team with another LGBT business and become eligible for that contract. Or perhaps that LGBT business is supplying directly to TD Bank and you're supplying to that LGBT business owner. And again, this is all about creating wealth and generating wealth in our communities where we historically have not had the opportunity to do so. So as an LGBT business enterprise, you have the opportunity to leverage your certification to make connections to grow your company. And in addition to the ability to network and gain access to matchmaking opportunities, we provide educational opportunities, whether it be through webinars or LGBT Civ and Pitch Fridays programs, to give our businesses the tangible hands-on experience they need to get into that boardroom and make that pitch and do business successfully. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our Stakeholder Engagement Center. I'm going to be brief with this, but essentially this is our connection hub for our LGBT business owners and our partners to make sure that we are providing the right kind of tools and resources to our businesses, and also to make sure that we are connecting them with an opportunity. So if Steve reaches out and says, hey, I'm doing this event and I need 4,000 pamphlets printed out, can I have an LGBT supplier to do that? We will go, our engagement center team will go through the list of every single LGBT business owner that is qualified to meet that bid, and then provide that list back to Steve so Steve can reach out to your company to provide those. And we can even be more specific. Perhaps this is an event, this is particularly for the National Trans Visibility March, and Steve wants to get a supplier that is particularly TGNC. We can do that. We have the ability to narrow down our search criteria based on industries, different identifications, and so forth. So the Engagement Center team is really focused on creating those opportunities for our businesses. I like to say 24/7, but they do sleep. So it's not completely 24 hours, 7 days a week, but basically all day, every day. Next slide, please. So as I said before, LGBT Business Enterprise Certification is the crux of what we do at NGLCC. We are the exclusive third-party national certification body for LGBT-owned companies, meaning that if your company is 51% or more LGBT-owned, operated, and controlled, you should be coming to us so that we can help you gain access to all of the opportunities that I was just talking about before. Next slide, Danny. So it's pretty simple to start certification. You go to my.nglcc.org. And again, you can reach out to me at the email that was provided here in the chat if you have any questions. That's where you're going to start your profile. And from there, you're going to get paired with one of our supplier diversity representatives at NGLCC to make sure that you're getting all the important documents that you need in. There are documents that are going to verify that you are an LGBT or a gender nonconforming individual. That is not to be invasive. That's to make sure that you are in fact who you say you are, and that, like I said, those cis straight white men walking up the street can't come in and steal contracts that we're hoping LGBT businesses can take advantage of. And then we host a virtual site visit, meaning somebody will get on Zoom or FaceTime with you to make sure that everything you put on paper is in fact the case, so that by the time your file comes to the National Certification Committee, they can put a stamp on it, give you a certification number, and your certificate. Next slide, please, Danny. And there's the certificate. So there you go. So you'll get one of those. You'll get an entire toolkit for how to take advantage of utilizing your certificate, ways that you can market your LGBT business enterprise certification to grow your company. And then, of course, most importantly, how to take advantage of everything being a part of the NGLCC network has to offer, from local chamber membership to your national certification through NGLCC. Next slide, please, Danny. So some of the benefits, as I said, you're going to receive national certification as a certified LGBT BE or a business enterprise through NGLCC, and gain access to our corporate partners through that my.nglcc.org database we were just talking about. You get to, again, utilize that on your website and your marketing materials. We have an amazing company called 5 North Chocolate. They were the first LGBT business enterprise to actually put their certified LGBT BE logo on their packaging, and it looks amazing. I usually keep the chocolate next to my desk, but I'm not allowed to do that anymore because I eat too much of it. But we love seeing our LGBT entrepreneurs utilize their certification as a point of strength, right? And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Angela. These companies want to do business with you, not in spite of the fact that you are a TGNC person, but because of that. And it's so, so important to say that we can put behind the stigma and the idea of being closeted out the door. Gabriel talked about this last night and how certification really allowed him to open up in an industry that he thought was otherwise incredibly transphobic. And it was not just what he thought, it was. But he's been able to pivot his entire journey as an entrepreneur to really live out his truth now, because he knows that there is a supportive business community out there, that his business is not going to go under when people find out that he is a trans entrepreneur. Again, we have our International Business and Leadership Conference. Obviously, when that's not happening, we have some amazing programs that are happening. And I see, Francesca, you just dropped a question in about mentorship. We have a mentorship program through NGLCC. You get paired with a corporate partner or a seasoned LGBT business owner for a year to really be your go-to person, right? We find so frequently that this doesn't just become a mentorship relationship, this becomes a friend. And now let me introduce you to somebody that I know, and really expanding upon your network of intentional folks, like you just said in your question, to help you grow and scale and leverage everything you have to offer as a business owner with innovative products and services. So I'll talk a little bit also about our matchmaker meetings. These are one-on-one 15-minute meetings where you go ahead and sit down with a fellow LGBT business owner or a corporate partner, and you pitch your product and service and tailor your sort of pitch to how that can be relevant to that company's products and services and what they need to deliver to their end user and their clients. It's amazing to be able to sit face-to-face with somebody that could actually be buying your product down the line and starting that relationship in the ecosphere of our programs and events. Next slide, please, Danny. So Strategic Growth and Development Institute, we do a number of programs every single year. We launched this year the NGLCC Accelerate Certified LGBT Business Enterprise Capacity Development Program. Say that 5 times fast. That program is a 6-week intensive program focused on scaling our entrepreneurs up and giving them access to the tools and resources they need to learn, grow, and scale and take their businesses to the next level. So everything from cybersecurity to marketing to leadership and so much more. We've been so privileged to produce this program, the Accelerate program, and so many more like it through our Webinar Wednesdays program during this COVID period. And then again, we have other professional development opportunities, some of which that I will get to here at the end. Next slide, please, Danny. So we here again is the email transinclusion@nglcc.org. Please do reach out if you have any questions. We launched our TGNC Inclusion Task Force in August 2018 with the intent to grow the number of certified trans and gender nonconforming entrepreneurs in the NGLCC database, not only to help them grow and scale their companies, but also to give an economic identity to the TGNC business community. We've been able to do this for the LGBT business community broadly through a report you can find at nglcc.org/report that annotates the America's LGBT business economy, the contributions to our annual economy here through LGBT business owners in the US. It's an estimated $1.7 trillion annually, which would make us the 10th largest economy in the world. So if we can replicate that study and zero in specifically on the TGNC business community, we know that data is so sparse for the LGBT community broadly, and then even more specifically when we're looking at the TGNC business community and then minority TGNC community on top of that. But this kind of work will allow us to be able to build an economic identity for the TGNC business community and to better advocate for the community broadly, right? Because I said this last night, a lot of times the moral and ethical argument for inclusion does not always resonate, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately in this case, we live in a world where money does resonate. And when we say that we are job providers, we're taxpayers, we're healthcare providers, we are bottom line contributors to this economy and we deserve to be recognized, it's harder to turn that rhetoric away, right? So that is one of the big pieces that we're looking to accomplish through the task force. Next slide, please, Danny. And then similarly, we have our NGLCC Communities of Color Initiative, focused similarly in the same way that the TGNC task forces, the Communities of Color Initiative, or COCHI, was built off of this model to, again, provide tools and resources to the LGBT POC community, business community, to make sure that we are specifically looking at business owners where they are in their journey and with the unique challenges that they face based on systemic issues in this country, and how we can best serve them to grow and scale, and again, provide those opportunities where they're otherwise lacking. Next slide, please, Danny. So I mentioned our report, the America's LGBT Economy Report. Next slide, Danny. We found that LGBT businesses in the US, and this is a conservative estimate, that they contribute an estimated $1.7 trillion to the US economy annually. Next slide, Danny. As I said, we'd be the 10th largest economy in the world. Oh, I thought this next slide would have it. We also create over 30,000 jobs annually, and the average LGBT-owned business is in business for 12 years, whereas the average small business in the US broadly is active for 5 years, meaning that, as I said before, we have, I think, the best in class. Our businesses are contributing unique products and services that are fulfilling market niches that consumers really want to take advantage of. And so our business at NGLCC is helping connect you with those opportunities to grow and scale. And I do realize we're at 8:01, so I'm going to go very, very quickly. We can skip this slide. We just sort of talked about this a bit. We can skip this slide as well. We talked about teaming up for contracts, or contracts being tiered, meaning that you're supplying to an LGBT-owned business that's supplying directly to a corporation. So next slide, please. Okay, so please check out our NGLCC COVID-19 Resource Hub. I mentioned our Webinar Wednesdays program every Wednesday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, by and for the LGBT business community, different tools and resources that we are sharing with you free of charge to help you learn, grow, and scale. You can also, at that link, check out past recordings of previous webinars, whether it's using LinkedIn to your highest advantage, or pivoting your business in the time of COVID-19 and your leadership strategy to do so. And then finally, twice a month, we have the NGLCC LGBT Sip and Pitch Fridays program. This is open to any certified business of the NGLCC or any business that is a local affiliate member to take advantage of the opportunity to pitch before a panel of corporate judges. Again, this is twice a month. You can visit nglcc.org/sip and pitch to learn more. And of course, you can reach out to me at transinclusion@nglcc.org or skent@nglcc.org to learn more. Thank you so much. I appreciate this space. Thank you to the Trans Visibility March and TD and Next Street for making tonight possible. So thank you.
Thank you all. Sabrina.